Hey folks, we are gearing up to start another one of our PAC-T tests. That is precision, accuracy, consistency, and terminal performance. I'm going to be shooting my precision and accuracy test using those bullseye targets right there set at 15 yards from the muzzle. My consistency measurement is going to come from the lab radar. We're going to be looking at the consistency of those muzzle velocities. I'm shooting a 5-shot group today, and I've got 2 new bullets. Well, really one is not a new bullet. These are both 9mm Federal HST rounds. This is a 147 grain. This is new for me. I have not shot a 147 grain HST before. The second is our kind of reigning champion. The HST bullets have done so well for us. This is the 124 grain 9mm Luger plus P round. I've shot this quite a bit before. Really an impressive bullet. Does very, very well in all of our tests for personal defense, all the way through to terminal performance, which comes by shooting 1 round into clear ballistic gelatin, a 20% gelatin block, considered a NATO block, and I shoot that from 7 yards. So 124 grain HST here, 147 grain right over here. Now, I haven't shot many 147s at all, and the reason is those 147s, yes, they are a heavier bullet, but they tend to be so much slower than the 124s. Well, you could say that that same argument could be used for why shoot a 124 when you can shoot an even faster 115, or an even faster 90 grain, or an even faster 70 grain. Well, the reason why I choose the 124 is it's kind of a happy medium. What it's doing is it has plenty of mass provided terminally into that target, plus it still gives us pretty darn good velocities. So it has worked out really, really well that way in all of our ballistic testing and the scoring that comes out of it. Now, enough talk, enough setup. I think we figured out what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be shooting this with my H&K VP9, a fantastic little pistol. You've seen me shoot that quite a bit. Let's go ahead and get started. First up is the 147 grain. We'll let the new kid on the block go first. Bullseye target on the left. Looks like it did pretty good from here. Let's go ahead and load up 5 rounds of the 124s. And now the 124 is going to shoot this at the bullseye on the right. There's our 5. We recorded all 5. 1255 was that last round muzzle velocity. Let's take a look at how she did. 8.1 feet per second of standard deviation. That's our consistency. Very similar to what we saw with the 147s, but I think we had about, just by glancing at it as we were shooting, looks like we had about 200 feet per second faster the 124s compared to the 147s. Now, 1 round each, into the clear ballistic gelatin. Once again, 147 will be fired first, then the 124. Okay, 1 round, HST 147 grain, 7 yards at that block of ballistic gelatin. This bullet is going to have to pass through 2 layers of some canvas first. Let's see how it goes. Well, it went where I wanted it to. That's cool. And now the 124 grain. Well, you saw it live, as they say. That first round, the 147 grain, actually fully penetrated the 16-inch block, just barely making it into the second block. The 124 is sitting right there, and it did not clog. This canvas that I'm using is not clogging these bullets. If you're a subscriber to our channel or you've watched our PAC-T tests before, you know how this stuff goes. We're going to do a wrap-up now, and by the way, if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing and you won't miss out on any of our new content that we're putting out. Anyway, let's start with the 147 grain Federal HST. This is the bullet right here. And what's interesting about it, a couple of things. Number one, some of that soft barrier is embedded in the core of that bullet. Number two, I can notice, I haven't seen this before with the HST bullets, but I can see 2 distinct cannelure grooves in this 147 grain bullet. It's interesting that it has a long shank retained in this bullet, and it expanded pretty nicely as well. Before I get into those terminal ballistic results, let's take a look at the precision, accuracy, and consistency. You saw those things on the screen, so really not too much in addition to talk about, but the final numbers were the group that you saw is a pretty nice group, actually shot pretty darn nicely, again with that HK VP9. The final extreme spread was 0.736 of an inch. That's just over or just under 3/4 of an inch group. That's not too bad at all. And again, that was shot at 15 yards. Score was 44. Score was 44 with 0 in the X. Now on to the terminal ballistic results. This bullet ended up scoring only 305 points. And the reason for that low score didn't break that 400 barrier that I like to see in a good, reliable bullet. It did not break that 400 barrier, and the reason for that, I'm certain, is because it officially, and probably rightly so, did over-penetrate. It went all the way through gel block number 1, and as you saw, I was able to pretty darn easily remove that bullet from, let's say, just under the skin of that second gel block. 16.5 inches of official penetration, and that's a lot of penetration through those 20% NATO blocks. We had 100% weight retention. This bullet actually gained weight. A couple of reasons for that probably. It ended up with 148 0.9 grains. A couple of reasons for that. Number one is it may not have really been 147 grains when it was loaded at the factory. Might have been a little bit heavier bullet to start with. Plus, remember, we ended up picking up and retaining some of that soft barrier all the way through. The diameter of the retrieved bullet was 0.599 of an inch. That is 169% expansion. And the length of that retrieved bullet was just over half an inch, 0.536. Looking at that transient cavitation channel or the temporary wound channel, I'm kind of unimpressed. It really didn't do too much. And I think what's happening is, yes, this is a little bit heavier bullet, 147 grain, a little bit on the heavy side, obviously, for a 9mm. But it's quite slow, just over 1,000 feet per second out of the muzzle. What's also interesting, though, is that when I look at the Hornady hits calculation that I also calculate as part of my PAC-T analysis, don't always talk about it though, but the hits analysis, this bullet ended up with the highest hits value that we've ever had out of any of our 9mm bullets. So that's kind of interesting. However, the rating, the hits rating, still puts it into the category, as Hornady lists it, of being a small game bullet. Well, be that as it may, we're not going to spend too much time on that part. Let's now look at the 124 grain Federal HST. This bullet we've shot several times, and so we shot it again into a soft barrier, a little bit different type of soft barrier, and this is the bullet. You will notice, once again, it picked up and retained that soft barrier as it's traveling through, folded back nicely right back to the base of that bullet, and I can see one cantilever groove on this 124 grain bullet. Precision, accuracy, and consistency group pretty darn nicely. Just over half an inch group. Extreme spread 0.589 of an inch, and it scored 49 points with 0 in the X. There's our absolute X. None of them broke into that, so 0 in the X, but 49 points. 1,244 feet per second out of the muzzle, 8.1 feet per second standard deviation. That's really good for a handgun round to break into the single digits. Now let's look at the terminal performance numbers. 12 7/8 inch of penetration. Jacket and core did not separate. That's really important. Of course, we don't see that too much anymore. Weight of the bullet after firing 123.6 grains. That's 99.7% weight retention. Effectively, that's 100% weight retention then. Diameter of that retrieved bullet was 0.583. That's an expansion of 164%. And the length of that retrieved bullet is 0.372. The overall score for the 124 grain bullet once again broke into that 400. We had a total score of 407.5 points. And by way of comparison, the hits value is 217 for the 124 grain bullet. Take that with a grain of salt, I would say, but I throw that out there nonetheless. There's another indicator that's been used over the years. In fact, it was developed quite a long time ago by General Julian S. Hatcher, and it's called RSP, Relative Stopping Power. And if we compare RSP for these two bullets, we see that the 147 grain had an RSP value of 132, but the 124 grain bullet surpassed it with 154. Lots of different ways to slice and dice these numbers, and all different ways of interpreting what we're seeing. I don't want to get too caught up on those derivatives. See, the derived, classified, classifiers. This did great, this did somewhat great, whatever. That's what I call, or those are what we call derivative products. I like to, in this case, look much more closely at the actual numbers. And for me, what's important is depth of penetration. We don't want to see over penetration, although there's not a whole lot of actual factual information saying that officially over penetrating bullet is really of any concern in the first place. So I'll throw that out there, but I don't really like to see that. Let's show me a bullet that will expend all of its energy inside of that gel block. I'll be happy. Keep it to about maybe 12, 13, 11, somewhere along the lines, inches of penetration into that. I like to see that. I like to see a bullet that retains all of its weight and expands very, very nicely, creating that deadly mushroom, lots of frontal area going through that target. And let's not forget, taking a look at that temporary wound channel, even on the handgun rounds, that still tells us some things about how that bullet is transferring energy into that target. So I like to look at those things, and once again, this 124 Federal HST bullet has done quite well. Coming up, we're going to be doing another Federal bullet that I've been interested in for a while, have not shot it before. It is the 124 grain Federal Punch. That's coming up just a little while. Thanks for watching.